Welcome to Part 1 of the Staff Hiring, Training, and Evaluation course of the Nonprofit Bootcamp e-learning series. Many small organizations face turnover of staff, find it hard to manage staff well, and are under-resourced in both time and money. Leaders who are able to write outcomes-based job descriptions, design simple and structured training, and conduct fair and effective evaluations can manage more smoothly and effectively. During each webinar, participants will hear key concepts, then develop a specific plan for one high-need role in their organization. Part 1 is about starting on the right foot, writing outcomes-based job descriptions. To bring on the best staff, you need to clearly describe your mission and your specific job. When organizations mix job announcements and job descriptions and list too many tasks, the foundation for the work is like shifting sand. Outcomes provide a framework. Looking at two specific food businesses, we will unpack their outcomes to see how they cleared up their mixed messages and hired smarter. Today's presenter is Peggy Silva, Principal of Consulting for Community. Peggy will be leading the HR staff hiring, training, and evaluation course and brings 30-plus years of experience helping businesses, nonprofits, and public agencies to develop staff development and training systems. From 7 years creating a full training program at Veritable Vegetable, through season-long warehouse training design at mid-sized food hubs, to many quick diagnosis and fix-it performance evaluation projects with smaller organizations, she has seen a lot. She knows how essential, thoughtful, and cleanly implemented HR systems are to food-focused organization success. Peggy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us, and please take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you. I guess anything more I'd like to tell you about myself is just that I am passionate about building a better food system, and I'm glad to be in the company of others who are passionate about that also. I have a lot of expertise in sort of focusing on clear and creative designs for adult education. And so I'd like to share pieces of those with you today. So lesson overview. So human resources, staff training, hiring, training, and evaluation. Today we're in the first part, starting on the right foot, outcome-based job descriptions. We'll look at simple and structured training next week and fair and effective evaluation in the week later. I want to make a little comment that human resources is really, really big, and there are lots of pieces of it. One piece that we won't be getting into, and of course it's really important, are things related to benefits and things related to labor law compliance. Those are something that you definitely want to have in place for your organization. They aren't something that I have a lot of expertise in, but our good friends at the Wallace Center, with all the people that they know, probably could put you in touch with someone if you needed someone on that topic. We're going to dip our toes into the three topics that are right here. I want to say a thank you to the organizations that I'm going to be sharing some of their work with you, that they're generous enough to have slogged through this work with me on figuring out outcomes-based job descriptions, training, and evaluation. Ritual Coffee Roasters is actually a very values-based business in San Francisco. Healthy Food, Healthy Families is a project of Farm Fresh Rhode Island in Providence. Common Market Philadelphia, of course, is in Pennsylvania. Green Market Co. is the food hub branch of Grow NYC in New York City. So the plan for the webinar series here, what I'd like to do to make it as relevant for you all as possible, is that we'll have examples from these folks. And then I'd like you to be thinking about a situation for yourself that you're facing. So if you've got one particular area of your work that's not working so well, the training is not there, people are confused, that kinds of things, then we will have you work on that so that you go away from these 3 weeks with something essentially like a little plan that you can start building yourself for clarifying your training, hiring, and evaluation. So I hope you have either a piece of paper with you and a pen or an electronic notepad or something that you can maybe make a few notes, okay? And if you come back for the following two webinars, bring your papers with you. You don't have to, we've got samples, but it might, again, just be a little bit helpful, okay? So the path for success in working with staff, in staff development. I think we hear it a lot about people being our most important resource. It was really interesting being at the conference last week in Albuquerque, because there was lots and lots of focus on how do we build equity within the food system. And one of the things that I totally believe is that building equity starts from hiring. If we hire well and clearly, if we then train well and clearly, if we evaluate fairly, we are investing in and respecting workers from all backgrounds. It is important to hire carefully because mistakes are very, very costly. And so again, you'll hear me say it all the time, and it's right there at the bottom of the slide. Clarity is key. We have to be clear about what we're expecting people to do. A few years ago, I read a poll from Gallup, the big organization. There were thousands and thousands of people and businesses interviewed, and they said the three most important things for a worker to be satisfied and successful is that the worker needs clear understanding of what he or she is expected to do. He or she needs the tools to do the job, and a good relationship with the immediate supervisor, all of which I totally believe are part of what we're working on today. So along the path, the framework that I've developed over the course of quite a few years, and again, in much gratitude with all those organizations that have worked with me, are 5 steps on a path. So outcomes is what we're looking at today. The next piece is writing competencies for those outcomes. That's a big project. I've worked on it with lots of folks. We won't be working on it in these webinars because they're fairly brief, but I certainly have resources to share about it if people are interested in the future. Training we'll be looking at. The application of the training in the workplace is really important. I believe very strongly in training that happens at the workplace, that is not canned and only one size fits all, so that it has to work where you work. And then, of course, good evaluation. Here, next, I have a photo of some of your friends from the food system. And these folks were actually doing an activity in a training that I did with them a few years ago of ordering these 5 different parts of the system. They had the pieces down, they shuffled themselves around, and they got them all in order. And as you can see, they did very, very well. Louise there is holding the outcomes page, which comes very, very first. So, outcomes. Let's look at them. So an outcome statement, an outcome, is a broad statement of benefit that's reaped by a community or an organization when a function is done well. Functions are your main chunks of work that lead you to achieve your vision or mission. So just take a minute and think, whatever your organization is about doing in terms of building a more sustainable food system, you do certain things. You might buy from farmers, you might arrange to have product delivered, you might do sales to farmers markets or stores, you might do community education, you might run a farm, you might have all sorts of different pieces. And I call them functions because in small organizations, you generally don't have a whole department that's doing something. In a larger organization, you might have a purchasing department and you'd be writing outcome statements for your purchasing department. But in small organizations, you might have one person doing purchasing, or you might even have half a person doing purchasing. So that's why I call them functions or chunks, just to say these are the pieces that you do in order to make your organization work and achieve its mission in the community. So when I was working with Ritual Roasters, these are the functions that they identified. And first, what I did with them is I worked with their management team to say, how are we going to organize and get clarity for the managers on the different pieces that our organization is about? And they had a lot of overlap and a lot of confusion, and they had to resort things, which they have actually done some restructuring in the time that I've been working with them. But basically, they came up with these 6 different main functions. So you can see them right there. Those are all the things that need to happen, the chunks of the work. And there are people who are involved in each of those chunks of work in order to make the organization achieve its mission in the community, which is, I think, to make people happy because they have good coffee, which I'm sure many people here can agree with is a very good thing. Okay, so in this, I'll go back for just a sec. So you see the third one right here is called Roasterie. So this is where the coffee is roasted and packaged and put together and sent out. So in that function, there are actually 5, although I made a mistake here and said 6, 5 different outcome statements that relate to Roasterie. So there's 2 of them that are listed right here. So that's your function. There's your statement. If everything gets done that needs to get done well in the Roasterie by all those people, staff people, and possibly volunteers you might have in that function, in this here, then space and equipment's functional, everything's safe, attractive, there's minimal downtime, production of coffee happens. So that's an outcome statement for them. Also, another one that they aspire to, these are aspirational statements. All the coffee leaves the roastery as an amazing tasting final product per established quality standards. So that's something that is definitely aspirational, okay? Now, here's the little bit of piece where I'm going to give you 1 minute, hopefully, to do a little writing yourself. So I'd like you to think about one function that's important to your organization, whatever it is that you're doing. Is it purchasing? Is it driving? Is it the warehouse? It could be a community education project. It could be running a cafe where you share your products with the community. So pick one, if you would, and could you write a couple of outcome statements, just jot down a couple of outcome statements for that function. And I'll give you just, say, 1 minute to do that. Okay, 1 minute. I hope everybody's got a little page or an electronic screen that is saying, here's my function, and here's a couple of aspirational outcome statements that if this function is done well, if everybody here does really good work and all the stars line up, then these good things happen. So look at your statements and just check yourself. Make sure that if you're there with somebody else from your organization, you can check each other's. Make sure that you state a benefit. Make sure that you're not writing tasks. So you're not saying the purchasers talk to the farms. You're saying something like excellent relationships with farms are in place, or something like that. That is a big benefit that happens if everything goes well. And you're only going to write 4 or 5 of these for every function, so they are going to be kind of big. I want to say a little bit then, okay, so we're doing this work on outcomes, and I want to step back from a focus on staff development for a moment. We're going to go there again, but talk about how outcomes are useful overall, not just in staff development, but there's a couple of smaller organizations that I've worked with who really have found this useful in organizing their thinking of the leaders, the stakeholders in the organization, so that when you're first all together and you're all doing everything and everybody's tripping over everybody else maybe, and something's not getting done, to take a pause and say, okay, what are the main things we have to get done in order to achieve our mission? And let's line them up so that we start to say, here's our parts, here's what we're doing. Then we can start to lay in our outcome statements for the functions, and we can start writing the tasks that have to be done in order to achieve those. So some of these things that are listed on this slide are things that are beneficial, have been found beneficial for organizations that have used this sort of functions and outcomes to get themselves organized before they even move on to the staff development piece of it. Because it's always helpful for the managers to know what's going on before you bring the staff in, right? So in staff development, then, you want to clearly describe the work, right? So you want to clearly describe work to people you're hoping to hire or volunteers, because I really believe that volunteers need a similar level of organization and attention as do staff people if they're going to perform well. Job announcements and job descriptions. When you have your outcomes listed, they give you a framework for those next steps, writing competencies, writing training, etc. And they also give staff people or volunteers both structure and flexibility. And for example, when you write your outcome statements, you, like with our coffee, has to be excellent, quality standards. It might be that sometimes you don't have enough of the high quality, something happened. You have to make a smaller package. Maybe you have to send out a different type of coffee because the one that you were going to send out is not high enough quality. So there's some flexibility in there, but it's like any person working here has to know the outcome that we're aiming for so that whatever choices he or she makes fit in with that outcome. And part of this is somebody has, people often mention, you know, we need people that can think on their feet, we need flexibility, we need all those kinds of things, but you need a little bit of structure in order to give people flexibility. Okay. Now, one of the things that I find a lot of people do that's an error, I think, is that they mistake and confuse and put together the job announcement and the job description. So I've listed here what I've learned of the difference between those two. And if you keep them separate, things are going to be a lot clearer for you. I worked with one organization who had a job description mushed together with the announcement. It was 7 pages long. Person was hired and quit very quickly because it was just impossible to organize. You'll see that in this, on this slide here, I mentioned outcomes twice, so that once you've got those outcomes written, they're going to show up in all sorts of things that you do with your staff people that are working in that function. So in an announcement, you'll want to put the outcomes, and in the job description that comes later, the outcomes are going to show up again. Okay? So first thing it does is it advertises your organization. So you can see right here, there's a nice little coffee cup there. There's a pretty logo. You want that at the top. You want people that look at your announcement to say, ooh, this looks like a cool place to be. Now this slide and the next two are actually all one page, but I couldn't put them on one slide. So this is the announcement that they sent out for somebody for Roasterie, okay? And it even says things like the people that work here are nice, hardworking, and they know how to have fun. So you really want to work here, okay? Next one is primary responsibilities, and there they are. There's your outcomes. So you want to list for people a broad understanding of what it is that they're going to be expected to do if they work in the Roasterie. And really, in an announcement, you don't need much more than this. You need to be able to tell them the basics of what they're going to be doing. Because an announcement is really about, you're going to interview them, so you're going to get them in, you're going to put in whatever processes of application you need, resume, cover letter, checks for references, things like that. But you want them to kind of know what the job is about, okay? And then, so here are the things. This is the bottom part of the page of the announcement. What are your qualifications that you want? And I make a big distinction between qualifications and competencies, okay? So qualifications are what people bring, and competencies are what you train. Now, they might bring some competencies too, but basically you're going to be responsible for training them to do the job. You might tell them where the job is. You'll tell them, you know, how many hours a week it is. I believe in letting people know what the compensation is, so you're right up front about that. And then you want to give them the information of how to apply. And then at the bottom, of course, I said an announcement is an advertisement. And so you're going to be telling them again what a wonderful place you are to work, why they would like to be there. Okay? So that's an announcement. And a key thing about it, I'll say this again, is that in an announcement or a job description, outcomes belong to everyone. So if you're announcing for, say you have 4 people that are working in this roastery, you have a manager, you have 3 people, 2 of them work more on packaging, 1 of them works more on roasting. They all own those outcomes, but they're going to have detail when you get to the job description of what they're going to be focused on more. They're not necessarily going to be doing exactly the same thing. Obviously, the manager, and when you write a manager job description, is going to be responsible for managing the staff to assure that stated outcomes are achieved. One of the things that as you get bigger seems really important is that often you've got people who founded the organization and then they get into micromanaging or something. I hear about this. And so if you stick at outcomes, you stick at a big level. Don't get so into the micromanagement. Okay. And here you go then, the next thing that we have is moving from outcome to job description. Or not, I'm sorry, not from outcome, from announcement to job description. So that has a lot more detail. It has your name of your job. It'll give a little summary about the job, very short, couple of sentences. Give the information of who it reports to. If it supervises people, then you want to list that too. And then here you see your outcomes again. Vehicles are all in working order, roastery space and equipment, et cetera, et cetera. They'll be the same 5 that we saw before. Okay. And one of the things that I'm going to have you do, hopefully a little bit when we go to the Zoom in the office hours, is work a little bit on your tasks that come under your outcomes, because those are from the things that you have to have people do in order to achieve the outcomes. Then you will pull a few of those to put into your job description. Again, it's sample task. It's not an exhaustive 7-page list of every single thing the person might be expected to do, because that's a useless effort. You never will cover every single eventuality that might come up. Okay? And in fact, if you want to take a minute right here, since I think we have a minute, just a minute, just 1 minute, to write down for one of your outcome statements that you did, write down what are some tasks that you would need to have the person do in order to achieve that outcome. I'm giving you 1 minute on the stopwatch just to write down some tasks. Okay, good. That was 1 minute, and hopefully you've got a few sample tasks that you're ready to work with for your outcome that you'd like to focus on. And hit the ground running in the right direction. This is part of one of those great things that people often say to me when they don't have time for planning, they don't have time for training, they just need people to hit the ground running. And I always say to them, you got to take some time to plan and to train and to do all those good things, because then they will hit the ground running in the right direction. So we've looked at outcomes, we've looked at job announcements, we've looked at job descriptions, that very important first part of getting somebody on board. And now we will go onward.